Hello. Before we start, I just want to preface this video with letting you know I am making this video from home and I am sure I'm going to be interrupted numerous times. I'll do my best to pause the video. So my name is Alicia Yanez, and just a little bit about me. I have my bachelor's degree from IU in special education and then my master's from IUPUI and in special education with a concentration in emotional behavior disorders and autism. Oh my goodness, this dog is crazy. I've been teaching in Wayne Township for 20 years. My first 13 years, I was a special education teacher, with 5 of those being in the SSC, dealing with a lot of behavior and autism. Then I switched over to the LAP department, and that's where I've been for the past 7 years. I really do enjoy working with kids that have behavioral needs, so I got involved with the school-wide behavior team, and that's how I kind of came to be right here. So usually every year I give a presentation to student teachers about compliance and those types of behavioral things. This year we're trying it virtually, so let's give this a shot. Here we go. All right. So before we start, I do want to mention a few things. We have a GCE procedures handbook. It talks about like arrival, dismissal, hallway, and lunch procedures, and has some teaching targets. It would be really helpful for you to look at those. The school-wide update is more about the proactive, positive behavior incentives we have for students. Unfortunately, due to COVID, a lot of those things cannot happen this year, but there are still a lot of good resources, and you can see what we would be doing on a typical normal school year. So for today, we're talking about 2 types of behavior. We're talking about stop behaviors, which are things you want the child to stop doing, and start behaviors, which are things you want the child to start doing. The different behaviors do need to be addressed in different ways. And so what I mean by this, you are going to have a student for sure that has multiple behavior issues, and you have to pick one thing to start with. You can only do one at a time. So that means you need to make a decision which behavior is most interfering with the learning of that student or the learning environment. So I gave a little synopsis here of a student yelling and not completing work. You need to address the behavior that's interfering the most, which would be the yelling behavior. And just know that you are going to have to let some things slide. You might see them with their hood up and their phone out and that, rolling their eyes and making faces at you, and you just have to let those types of things slide when you're doing a compliance training, which is basically what this is. So we have some trauma and behavioral links here. Most students in Wayne Township have some kind of trauma. And I would say definitely the student population at Garden City has trauma. We have a significant number of students, but something we don't know is how much the trauma does impact their learning. Oh my goodness, more people coming in and out of my house. So most acting out students do have trauma that interferes with their learning, and it affects their executive functioning skills. So executive functioning is huge. It is paying attention, organizing and planning, initiating tasks and staying focused on them, regulating the emotions, and self-monitoring. As you could probably think of right now, you have students in your situation who have trouble with all of these. And a lot of times it is due to some kind of trauma. So we're going to talk about 6 variables that affect compliance. First, we want to make more start than stop requests. Start requests help the students know what they should be doing, because stop requests a lot of times do sound negative, bossy, and you're going to get a more typically negative reaction. And there's an example here. start your math. It should say your. Start your math. Don't is to stop playing in your desk. So think about it. You have a math assignment. It's on the desk, but the kid is playing with something inside their desk. What you'd want to say to that student is, start your math assignment. Don't say, stop playing in your desk, because then they're focusing on the don't action of the desk instead of the starting behavior of what we really want them to do, which is the math. All right, make your request clear and descriptive. So trauma makes it difficult for students to follow simple routines that we think are completely just like obvious. So typically you'd be like, do your first problem. It's on page 100. Do number 2. Here's a do one. I am looking for students with their math books open to page 100 and are quietly working on problem 2. And here's a don't. It's math time. Get busy. Start on your math. Pairing this with visuals will get an even better response. So I really like using your smart board or some kind of like dry erase board or your chalkboard or whatever, and just tell them what to do. Because I find most people get frustrated with repeating themselves. So if you don't want to tell them 100 times to do problem 2 on page 100, write it down, and when they ask, a simple gesture to the board will take care of it. So just make sure that you are clear and decisive, because there's going to be a kid who maybe has tuned out, and when you say get busy or start your math, that doesn't help them know what to do. Okay, so keep your voice tone neutral and soft, kind of like the voice tone I am using right now. If you do have a more raised tone of voice or a volume that shows like that you're upset or some kind of emotion, the kids with trauma will tend to tune you out. That's because that's what they hear. If you hear someone yelling at you all the time, you're going to tune out a teacher who is yelling at you. Use a calm and just normal speaking voice. Showing emotions such as guilt, disappointment, shame, or yelling in a condescending tone don't do anything to help that student, and in fact will only cause your relationship to get worse. So I try to never start a conversation with, I'm really disappointed. They don't need that. You need to do something like, I've noticed that you haven't been doing your work and I'm concerned. So avoid guilt, disappointment, shame, or yelling or a condescending voice. And again, I will fix my typos here. This one, oh gosh, close proximity. You need to make these requests, your do and don'ts, well, let's say do statements, in really close proximity to the student. These students are going to need to save face, meaning that their peer, they know their peers are watching them, and if you call them out, you have lost them. So I usually would suggest to approach the student in a calm manner, make some physical effort to make sure there's privacy. So maybe you kind of turn your body away. Sometimes calling them into the hall would be an okay thing if that's something you do for a lot of situations, not just negative. But if they know when you get called into the hall and for negative, I wouldn't suggest doing that. So I like to usually get down to their level, sit at a table, sit side by side, kind of, facing each other. I would not suggest calling the student up to your desk, where it looks like you're the boss and they're just like your little minion. So approach the student in a calm manner, make the physical effort to make sure there's privacy. Don't call out the students. Ooh, this was a big one. Don't call students out in front of other staff members. I hate when this situation happens to me since I push into a lot of classrooms. Oh, Mrs. Yanes, you wouldn't believe how much time blank and blank has spent playing around today. If you need to tell me that, I would prefer you tell me either by slipping me a note, calling me over to the corner, or something like this. All that does is reinforce disappointment and shame and causes them to regress back into their little hole and their acting out behaviors. Don't redirect or make requests while seated at your desk or table. So, yeah, I really don't like this. If a teacher's like doing something at their desk or working at a table with a small group, don't yell out, "Hey, sit down, do this." Because what you're doing is you're modeling the exact behavior you want the student to stop doing. So I'm going to take a quick break for my voice, and then we'll go on to the next ones. Okay, I'm back. Okay. So some things you need to be cognizant of when you're with your request format. So just remember, kids' brains aren't fully developed, especially a kid who has some kind of trauma. So asking them, let's go through this scenario. A teacher says, "Would you stop teasing?" The kid just thinks, "No, why would I want to? This is super fun." And then the teacher goes back and says, "You need to stop teasing." And the kid thinks, "You aren't going to tell me what to do." If you try, "I need you to stop teasing," the kid thinks, "I know what the adult needs from me." And I would even suggest sometimes using an explanation with that. "I need you to stop teasing because it's really disrupting the classroom, or you're really hurting the feelings of others." Also, you might want to, I'm going to have to plug in my computer. Hold on.